Hello, and welcome to the 12 Days of Tradmus. If you're new around here, my name is Kit, and Tradmus is a series I do in December where I talk about the harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. Basically, my normal content, but more of it and with a festive flair. And on the 7th day of Tradmus, we're discussing Classically Abby. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Abby, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content she puts out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Classically Abby is a YouTuber with 114,000 subscribers who purports to talk about classic living, traditional values, and modern, my jaw hates this word so much, femininity, which boils down to one single message, which we'll get to in a moment. Her view counts are still abysmal for her subscriber numbers, and I have a feeling that most came from her relentless ad campaign in 2020, which is probably how most people know her, and from her talks at colleges. Students listen to her speech and subscribe to her channel, and then never get around to watching her videos. She seems content though, and she also has her Substack where she writes articles and has a book club, and where you can pay an additional fee for a personal coaching session. On my Mrs. Midwest and the alt-right video, I received this comment. I really hope you have a Classically Abby update in store. Her stuff lately has been so unhinged, like mandatory motherhood for all women unhinged. I have done commentary on Abby's bizarre takes about what life for a woman must be, and in case you missed one of them, I'll link the Classically Abby playlist in the cards, and if you haven't seen those videos yet, you might want to do a quick watch through because they're going to be referenced a lot in this video. That comment did get me thinking though, and from there I went to Abby's Twitter account, and that was when I realized that Abby is very dogmatic in her thinking. Her brother, Ben Shapiro, is the same way, and I am still curious as to what their parents did to make 2 of their 4 kids think they know the one true way to live. As we have talked about before, Abby believes the one true path to happiness and fulfillment for women is marriage and motherhood. Even if you have doubts about whether or not that's what you want, even if you doubt the wisdom of pursuing either of those paths yourself, well, if you won't do it because you want it, Abby thinks you should do it because society is better when people are married and having kids. And it should go without saying that she means women marrying men. In Abby's world, you are not allowed to be anything other than cis and straight. She very rarely acknowledges anything outside of the binary, which, in my opinion, is because she really does want to go back to the 1950s, when decorum was important and people just didn't speak of things that didn't slot neatly into their worldview. So, what is her prescription for women? Well, first, plan your career around your children. Yes, you should choose your career based on kids you may or may not have and that you may or may not even want. Abby strongly encourages careers with flexible schedules that you can leave off for several years and then return to when your kids are in school, and I have to admit, I can't think of any career that you can just leave for years and then pick up like nothing happened. Even traditional jobs for women, like nursing and teaching, require continued education. Also, well, this strikes me as a wee bit hypocritical. What my day looks like. 2-hour drive to the airport, 45-minute flight to DC, a little shopping upon arrival, getting a mani-pedi to look presentable, speech at YAF, go back to the airport, 45-minute flight back, 2-hour drive home. Good and busy day. I suppose this could be considered a flexible job, as I assume Abby can decline speeches whenever she wants, but I would be willing to bet this isn't a career path she would encourage for young women. Which kind of makes sense, because if there's a lot of women traveling the country telling other women they need to stay close to home for their family, well, it would look odd. But honestly, Abby's speaking fee is $0 to $5,000. I would love to see how often she's a volunteer speaker, because I would be willing to bet her fee is 0 more often than not. However, this does speak to Abby's privilege. She has her family nearby to look after her kids, and her husband makes enough money so she can indulge in her hobby of traveling to colleges to give speeches about the importance of traditional values. If I recall correctly, she does say that YouTube is a great option since you can create your own schedule, which is true within reason. The algorithm will punish you if you go too long without uploading, and it can be finicky in general, so I'm not so sure I would recommend it for steady income, but, well, Abby is her own boss. And in her most recent newsletter, she announced that she would be pausing subscriptions. I would like to note that I am not a paid subscriber and I subscribed by accident when researching the Tradwife hustle. Anyway, the newsletter. It's Monday, and I feel so close to labor I can taste it. I am just about 38 weeks along, and I have been contracting on and off since Thursday night, so we are on tenterhooks waiting to see when this little baby will join us. But man, am I exhausted. As a heads up, I will pause your subscriptions for about a month while we get our bearings, so you will not be charged for the month I take off for maternity leave. I'm hoping I can hop back into our book club meetings right around Christmas to discuss our latest book club selection. So Abby is her own boss, and she gave herself a month of mat leave. And then a few days later, she posted this reel. In this reel, Abby is spitting fire about prioritizing motherhood and traditional values over being a girl boss and getting what's yours. I would like to know what Abby considers a girl boss. I would assume it's a woman who owns her own company or is at the top of a company in general, but I suspect that, as someone with a career, Abby would consider me a girl boss. And if I were to get pregnant and take mat leave, I would at least get 3 months at my salary. Abby is giving herself a month without pay, which is another indicator of her privilege, and also another indicator that Abby's career is important to her. For all her talk about how women find fulfillment and happiness in being a wife and mother, and that's the most important thing a woman can do, she enjoys what she does and she wants to keep doing it. And she knows the longer she's away, the harder it will be to regain whatever momentum she has. Speaking of, women should prioritize their children's upbringing and well-being over their own self-fulfillment. The question is about parenting, but Abby only mentions women. Why shouldn't men prioritize their children's upbringing and well-being? Honestly, I don't think Abby cares about men. She'll give lip service about how men need respect, but she doesn't seem to believe they're capable of emotion or attachment. Men want to raise their kids too. Men also want to love and be loved. They are not emotionless automatons who serve as a wallet for their family and are okay with it so long as they're respected. Air quotes, because I'm not sure you can really respect someone you only see as a wallet. Also, I think Abby might be a bit paranoid. She thought Barbie was woke and unwatchable, which isn't a surprise because her brother, and the majority of conservatives, had the same opinion. But Greta Gerwig directing Barbie and Lena Dunham directing Polly Pocket means woke feminists are targeting your kids? What? First, Barbie had a rating of PG-13, and while teenagers are still kids, they're not young kids, and second, I imagine the Polly Pocket movie will be very different from Barbie because Polly, at least in my opinion, attracts a younger demographic. But Abby is making assumptions based on the directors, and what was the woke feminist message of Barbie? How are woke feminists targeting kids? How are we differentiating woke feminists from feminists? Or did she just string all this together as red meat for any conservatives that might be scrolling through? This does play a part in the issue at hand, though. Abby, like conservatives in general, is afraid that if kids hear about other ways of living, they'll not follow the path their parents set for them. And with that, we'll get back on the path Abby believes women must follow. After finding that flexible career, you need to get married. Abby does allow that not all women are called to marriage, but most are, and so you need to get married. She does talk about how it's important to share values and chemistry with your partner, not just chemistry, which I agree with, but she also married her husband a year after meeting him. It seems to be working out, but to be honest, I don't think she would tell us if she had any regrets. Abby has been very open about how she doesn't think we should talk about how difficult being a mother is, and I bet her feelings about marriage are the same. We shouldn't talk about how difficult marriage and motherhood can be because it might scare off some women, and I guess that would be bad or something. Anyway, per Abby, finding a man to marry is much harder now because, of course, you have to wait until marriage to have sex, and now that not waiting is the norm, it's harder for virtuous women to find a man because of those wanton harlots who are sexing them up. That's my wording, of course. Abby doesn't use that language, but that is the gist of it. Women who aren't waiting for marriage are stealing men from the women who are, which doesn't make much sense to me because if you're waiting for marriage, you probably want someone who is as well, which means the virtuous woman in Abby's world wouldn't even be interested in one of those worldly men, and thus she's actually not competing with those worldly hussies. Oh, and yes, marriage is the golden ticket to sex. Even if you've been with your boyfriend for 5 years, your boyfriend is still a stranger, and thus, if you're not married, you're having sex with a stranger. That was one of Abby's stranger statements, but the scariest one by far was her assertion that she doesn't like the idea that motherhood is a choice. I'm really perplexed by why she cares so much how other women live their lives, but I often get told how nice it is that I'm out with my baby. Women are naturally better with kids. It's awesome to encourage fathers who are working to provide for their families all day long to be great dads to their kids as well. She's also mentioned it being okay that her husband doesn't know where the diapers are because she's the primary parent and that's the mother's job. And if she wants to live that way, okay, but I don't think this strict gender divide should be encouraged. That's pretty much it though. It doesn't matter if you don't want kids. In fact, Abby thinks women who say that actually don't know what they really want until it's too late. And it doesn't matter if you're worried about your health or anything genetic a future kid could inherit. You should have kids anyway. It's not up for discussion. Just do it. Truthfully, people like Abby scare me because there is no room in their mind for disagreement or discussion. And though Abby herself doesn't worry me, she is part of a larger movement that wants to impose their beliefs on all Americans. Her husband, Jacob Roth, is an associate at a law firm where he specializes in political and election law with a focus on First and 14th Amendment litigation. Jacob brings his experience within the liberty movement from working with varied conservative and libertarian institutions, including his role as legal counsel for Young America's Foundation. As mentioned earlier, YAF is where Abby is a speaker, and when these folks talk about liberty, they don't mean everyone is free to choose their own path in life without government interference. They mean everyone is free to not hear any more about gay people, trans people, nothing that is deemed outside the norm or immoral like abortion. Their way is the only right way, and it's really something how they've co-opted the word liberty to mean something entirely different. I would also like to take this moment to note that Jacob was an intern with the Heritage Foundation, which released their Project 2025 agenda earlier this year. I'll link to Legion Miller's video on that below. Before we move into the last chapter of Abby's Dogma, I want to note that this does not excuse anti-Semitism, and that will not be tolerated. I would also like to note that I am not an academic, a journalist, or anything like that, and the following are still just my thoughts and opinions. I trust that we're all aware of what has been going on in Israel and Palestine since October 7th, and if not, I'll leave some links below. Shortly after, Abby began reposting images from a pro-Israel account on Instagram, and every newsletter starts with, "As I continue to post my regular content, please know that nothing is normal for Israel and Jews around the world. Please continue to keep the people of Israel in your prayers." This is understandable. It is a shock when something like this happens, especially to a community you are connected to, and especially considering the history of anti-Semitism around the world. However, on November 22nd, she retweeted the following from her brother. "All who are now proclaiming that because Israel was able to obtain the release of 50 hostages at the cost of 150 terrorists, de-escalation is now possible. You're out of your minds. Israel will not stop until Hamas is destroyed. That is Israel's political and moral duty." When they say until Hamas is destroyed, they mean until Palestine is destroyed. There is not a thought spared to the people in Palestine, not even the children, though Abby claims to be vehemently pro-life. I can't speak to other countries, but the American attitude toward Israel is frightening. I know there are Christians, some that have achieved high rankings in the government, who believe that certain things must take place in Israel for Jesus to come again, and they try to bring that about, ostensibly for Jesus to return, but I suspect more worldly motivations for their efforts. The utter lack of care or concern for Palestinians, the complete dehumanization of Palestinians, most of whom aren't part of Hamas, is wrong. And it is not anti-Semitism to say that Israel doesn't have a right to destroy a people. And honestly, this has been going on for decades. Israel has not been a peaceful, innocent neighbor. I will leave some links below for further reading on the situation, as well as links for donations to help the people of Palestine. I had hoped that perhaps Abby would be more conscientious regarding the situation, but no. Like everything else, there is one right way, and Abby, like so many others, will not consider any disagreement or discussion. And though she is, on her own, a microcosm of a larger issue, she is also part of that larger issue, as is her husband and brother, who both have much more influence than she.